The last guard hit the frozen ground before Seren fully understood what she had done. Silver flames still licked across her fingertips, casting dancing light over the 5 massive wolves who lay unconscious in the snow around her. The king's elite. The most feared warriors in all of Veldaris, wolves who had never been defeated in combat. And she, an Omega, had just brought them all down. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each exhale forming clouds of mist in the bitter mountain air. Behind her, the village children she had been protecting huddled against the woodcutter's shed, their small faces pale with terror and awe. "Go," Seren commanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "Find your parents. Tell no one what you saw here. Do you understand?" They fled without a word. Only when the last child had disappeared did Seren allow her legs to buckle. She collapsed against the nearest tree, her hand flying to the swell of her belly hidden beneath layers of wool and leather. The baby kicked. Once, twice. As if reassuring her that they were both still alive. "I know," she whispered, pressing her palm against the movement. "We need to run." But her body refused to cooperate. The silver fire that had erupted from her core had drained something vital from her reserves. She needed rest, food, time she did not have, because one of the guards was stirring. Seren watched through half-lidded eyes as the smallest of the elite, a wiry wolf with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, pushed himself onto his hands and knees. Blood dripped from his temple where her flames had touched him. He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw the moment recognition dawned. "You," he breathed, "the Omega from the designation ceremony, the one who vanished." Seren's heart stopped. 4 months. She had hidden for 4 months in this remote village at the edge of the kingdom, far from the capital, far from the court, far from him. She had dyed her copper hair to dull brown, had kept her head down, had told everyone she was a widowed beta seeking peace. And now, with one desperate act to protect children from wolves who would have dragged them away for Omega testing, she had destroyed everything. "You're supposed to be dead," the guard continued, his voice rising with each word. "The king, he said you must be—" He stopped, his eyes dropped to her belly, to the curve that even her loose clothing could not entirely conceal. Understanding crashed across his features like a wave. "No," Seren said, struggling to rise. "Whatever you are thinking." But the guard was already shifting, his human form dissolving into a lean gray wolf that bounded into the forest before she could summon another spark of flame. He was running to report. To the king. To Kaelen. The name alone shattered the fragile walls she had built around her heart. Seren pressed her fist against her chest, willing away the memories that flooded through the breach. His hands tangled in her hair, his lips tracing the column of her throat. His voice, rough with need, promising her that designation meant nothing. That beta or omega, common or rare, she would always be his. "You are my heart," he had sworn, his body curved around hers in the hidden chamber where they had stolen moments between duty and dawn. "When the council confirms my succession, I will claim you before the entire kingdom. Nothing will change that." She had believed him. She had still believed him when the designation ceremony revealed what her bloodline had hidden for 23 years. When the ancient crystal had blazed, not with the steady blue of a beta, but with the shimmering pearl of an omega, the rarest designation in wolfkind. Her grandmother had warned her this might happen, had spoken in hushed tones of women in their line who carried unusual gifts, powers that invited danger. "We are daughters of the primal wolves," the old woman had whispered. "Hide what you are, child. Always." Seren had dismissed the stories as superstitions. She would never dismiss them again. The crowd had gasped at her designation. The nobles had whispered. And Seren had looked to Kaelen, expecting to see the warmth she knew so intimately. Instead, she found ice. His amber eyes had stared through her as if she were a stranger. His jaw had hardened to granite. And when he spoke, His voice carried no trace of the man who had held her just hours before. "Secure all Omegas. Immediately. None are to leave the palace until the council convenes." Secure, as if she were property, as if the designation had transformed her from his beloved into his possession. Seren had not waited to learn what the council would decide. That night, while guards patrolled the Omega quarters and nobles debated her value as a breeding asset, she had slipped through the servants' passages and vanished into the darkness. She had been running ever since, and now she would have to run again. Seren forced herself upright, using the tree for support. The other 4 guards remained unconscious, but they would wake soon. She had perhaps an hour before they recovered enough to follow her scent. She gathered only what she could carry: the herbs for the morning sickness that still plagued her, her small pouch of coins, the pendant that had belonged to her mother, the only link to the bloodline that had apparently carried this impossible power through generations of women who had hidden it carefully. At the edge of the forest, Seren paused to look back at the village of Mist Hollow. Smoke curled from chimneys, lanterns flickered in windows. Somewhere, a child laughed. She would not bring destruction to these people. Whatever the king wanted with the Omega who had defeated his elite, he would not find her here. Seren turned toward the mountains and began to walk. 200 miles away, in the obsidian throne room of the Veldarian capital, a gray wolf burst through the doors without ceremony or permission. The nobles scattered, the guards drew their weapons, and the Alpha King rose from his throne with a snarl that shook dust from the ancient rafters. "You dare!" "Sire!" The wolf shifted mid-stride, collapsing to his knees in human form, blood still streaming from the wound on his temple. "I found her. The Omega. Seren." The name struck the room like lightning. Kalen went utterly still. His beta, Corvin, stepped forward with a warning hand raised, but the king did not seem to notice. Every particle of his attention had locked onto the bleeding guard at his feet. "Where?" The word was barely human. Mist Hollow. A village in the northern reach. She's been hiding there for months, working as a healer. The guard swallowed hard. "There's more, sire. She is with child." The silence that followed was absolute. Corvin watched his king's face cycle through emotions too quickly to name. Shock, anguish, a wild, desperate hope that seemed to tear him apart from the inside. Then rage. "You said you found her. Past tense. Where is she now?" The guard's face paled. I came to report immediately. The other 4 guards were incapacitated. By the time they wake, she will be gone." Kalen closed his eyes. A tremor ran through his massive frame, and when he opened them again, they blazed pure gold. "You left her. You found my mate, carrying my child, and you left her alone and unprotected." "My mate." The words rippled through the assembled court like shockwaves. Whispers erupted. Nobles exchanged glances of disbelief. But Corvin was not surprised. He had watched his king spiral into darkness over the past 4 months, had heard him howl into the night, a sound so broken that wolves across the kingdom had answered in shared grief, had seen him destroy his own chambers searching for any trace of her scent. He had known, even when Kalen refused to speak of it. "Mobilize the elite," the king commanded. "All of them. Every wolf capable of tracking. They leave within the hour." "Sire." Corvin stepped forward carefully. "The Omega defeated 5 of our best warriors single-handedly. Perhaps a more strategic approach." "I will not strategize about my mate." Kalen's voice cracked on the word. "She has been alone and pregnant and terrified for 4 months because of what I let her believe." "What you were forced to let her believe," Corvin corrected quietly. "The Sylvains. The Sylvains will answer for their crimes when I have Seren safe in my arms. Not before." Kalen turned to the assembled wolves, his command ringing through the hall. "Find her. Bring her to me. But hear me well?" His eyes swept the crowd with lethal promise. "If anyone harms her, if anyone touches her without her consent, if anyone so much as bruises her skin, I will personally tear them apart and scatter their remains across the four corners of this kingdom. She is to be brought to me unharmed. Is that understood?" The wolves dropped to their knees in unified submission. "Find her," Kalen repeated, his voice breaking. "Please, find her." In the mountains, miles away and climbing higher, Seren pressed her hand to her chest where a strange warmth had begun to pulse. She could not possibly know that her king was mobilizing an army to find her. She could not possibly know that he had claimed her as his mate before the entire court. All she knew was that she was hunted, pregnant, and the man she had once loved now wanted her captured. She would not make it easy for him. The snow began to fall as Seren disappeared into the wilderness, and somewhere far behind her, a king's howl of anguish split the winter sky. The village of Briarwood welcomed its newest resident without suspicion. Seren had chosen well this time. The settlement was smaller than Mist Hollow, barely 30 families, nestled in a valley so remote that traders visited only twice yearly. The people here had little contact with the wider kingdom, and even less interest in the politics of distant kings. They asked no questions when a pregnant woman arrived alone, claiming her mate had died in a logging accident. They simply offered her the abandoned midwife's cottage and asked if she knew anything about delivering babies. She did. It was the one piece of her healing knowledge that had nothing to do with the gifts she now kept rigidly suppressed. The silver fire had not stirred since that night in Mist Hollow. Seren refused to let it. The weeks passed in quiet routine. She delivered babies. She set broken bones. She brewed teas for coughs and kept her head down. But at night, when the baby shifted inside her, she could feel something strange. Movements that came from opposite sides at once, as if two tiny bodies were pushing in different directions. The village midwife had examined her twice now, commenting each time on her unusual size. "You are carrying more than one blessing, I think," the old woman had said with a knowing smile. Twins. The word haunted Seren's dreams, and every night she dreamed of Kalen. Dreams where his hands cradled her face and his voice begged her to come home. Dreams where he explained everything, made it all make sense, gave her a reason to believe again. She told herself they meant nothing. The warmth in her chest that pulsed stronger each day, the warmth that should not exist if he had truly rejected her, told her otherwise. A knock at her door made her jump. "Mistress Wren?" The voice belonged to young Talia, the baker's daughter, using the false name Seren had adopted. "The traders have arrived. Mother thought you might want fresh supplies." Seren's heart seized. Traders meant news from beyond the valley. News she both craved and dreaded. The village square was buzzing with activity when Seren arrived. She kept to the edges, examining bolts of cloth and dried herbs while her ears strained toward the conversations around her. Crops failing in the eastern provinces, noble houses in an uproar. The king has gone completely mad. Seren's hands stilled on a bundle of chamomile. "Mad how?" one of the village elders asked. The trader leaned forward conspiratorially. "They say he has not slept in months. They say he roams the palace at night, howling like a beast. They say he has deployed every wolf in the kingdom to search for someone." "Search for who?" "That is the strangest part." The trader's voice dropped. "An Omega. Can you imagine? The most powerful Alpha King in 3 generations, tearing apart his realm for an Omega. He has offered 50,000 gold pieces for information about her whereabouts. 50,000 gold. A fortune beyond imagining. Enough to ensure that every wolf in the kingdom would be hunting her." "What did this Omega do?" another villager asked. "No one knows for certain. But the rumors say she is carrying the king's heir. That he claimed her as his true mate before the entire court. That he has sworn to burn the kingdom to cinders if she is not found alive and unharmed." The world tilted beneath Seren's feet. She gripped the edge of the trader's stall, fighting to keep her expression neutral as her mind screamed. Claimed her as his mate, before the entire court. But that was impossible. He had rejected her. He had looked at her with cold eyes and ordered her contained like an animal. Unless he had not. Seren retreated to her cottage on legs that threatened to collapse with every step. Once inside, she barred the door and sank into the nearest chair. If she was his true mate, if he had claimed her publicly, then why had he shown such emptiness during the designation ceremony? Why had he ordered her secured like property? Unless something had been wrong that day. Unless the coldness she had witnessed was not rejection at all. The Solvanis. The name surfaced from memory like poison rising to the skin. House Solvane, with their ambitions and their political machinations. Lady Vila Solvane, who had pursued Kaelin for years, who had never hidden her fury at being overlooked for a common nobody. What if they had done something to him? The thought cracked open a door Seren had sealed shut, letting hope bleed through like light into a darkened room. Another knock at her door. More insistent this time. Mistress Wren. A male voice, unfamiliar and commanding. We know you are inside. Please open the door. We mean you no harm. She laughed bitterly at that. My lady. The voice shifted, becoming gentler. I am Corvin, first beta to the Alpha King. I have come alone, against my king's explicit orders, because there are things you need to know before he finds you himself. Corvin. She recognized the name. Kaelin had spoken of his beta with affection and trust, had called him the brother he had never had. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Seren moved toward the door. She opened it to find a single man on her threshold. Tall and lean, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that held something like relief as they found her face. Thank the ancestors, Corvin breathed. You are alive. You are both alive. His gaze had dropped to her belly. How did you find me? Seren demanded, keeping her body angled toward the back exit. The bond. I am blood bonded to my king. When his emotions spike, I feel echoes. For the past 3 days, those echoes have been growing stronger, pulling me north. Corvin's expression grew urgent. He is close, my lady. Closer than you realize. I estimate we have perhaps 2 hours before he arrives. Then I need to leave. Now. Please. Just listen. Then if you still wish to flee, I will not stop you. I will even help you. Something in his voice gave her pause. An undercurrent of desperation that did not match a man trying to capture her. 5 minutes, she said. Speak. Corvin exhaled heavily. The night of the designation ceremony, someone slipped a compound into the king's wine, a derivative of moonsbane, mixed with other elements our healers still cannot identify. It suppressed his wolf entirely, severed his connection to his instincts, his emotions, his bond with you. For 3 days he was essentially a puppet, responding to suggestions with no will of his own. The cottage spun around her. That is not possible, she whispered. We did not believe it either, until the effects wore off, and he woke screaming your name. Corvin's voice roughened. He remembered nothing of the ceremony, nothing of ordering you confined. The first thing he did was run to your chamber, and when he found it empty, he did not need to finish. Seren staggered backward, her mind fracturing. Drugged. He had been drugged. The empty eyes, the cold commands, the complete absence of recognition. It had not been betrayal at all. It had been violation. Who? She demanded, her voice raw. House Solvane. We cannot prove it yet, but we know. Lady Vela had been pressing the king for a formal courtship for months. When he refused, when he made clear that his heart belonged to another, she saw her opportunity. Corvin withdrew a folded letter from his coat. This was intercepted 2 weeks ago. We believe there are others we did not catch. The message inside was brief and brutal. The Omega whore has evaded our hunters twice. Double the team. Use the wolfsbane-tipped arrows. I want her dead before she can whelp that bastard. Ensure the body is never found. V.S. Seren read the words 3 times before they fully registered. They want me dead, she said flatly. They want you and the air you carry erased from existence. A howl split the evening air. Both of them went rigid. The sound came from the forest to the east, distant but unmistakable. A wolf's cry, but not just any wolf. Seren would know that voice anywhere. "He is here," Corvin said unnecessarily. "My lady, whatever you decide, you need to decide now." But Seren was no longer listening. The warmth in her chest had ignited into searing heat, and through it, she felt something she had not felt in 4 months. Him. Not the cold stranger from the ceremony, the real Kalen. His presence slammed into her consciousness like a wave, desperate, anguished, terrified, hopeful, and underneath it all, a devotion so vast it threatened to drown her. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. He has been in agony, she realized aloud, this entire time. He has been suffering as much as I have. Another howl, closer now, joined by others, dozens of wolves, their voices rising in a chorus that shook the valley. And beneath those sounds, a different noise. Hoofbeats, approaching from the south. Corvin's head snapped toward the window. What he saw drained the color from his face. Sylvain riders. At least 20. They must have been tracking me, waiting to see if I would lead them to you. Seren's blood turned to ice. They know the king is close. They know this is their last chance. Corvin drew a blade from his belt. "My lady, you need to run. Now. Head toward the king's howls. His wolves will protect you. What about you? I will hold them as long as I can." Before Seren could argue, the first arrow shattered her window. The shaft buried itself in the wall inches from Seren's head. She dropped to the floor on instinct, her arms wrapping around her belly as glass rained down around her. Corvin was already moving, flipping her small table onto its side to create cover. "The back exit," he commanded. "Now." "There is a hidden door in the root cellar?" Seren gasped. "It leads to the forest." "Then go. I will draw their attention." Another arrow punched through the wooden wall, followed by a third. Through the shattered window, Seren could see shadows moving in the failing light. Not wolves. These attackers remained in human form, armed with crossbows and blades that glinted with an oily sheen. Poison. They were not taking chances this time. Corvin shifted in a blur of motion, his lean gray wolf bursting toward the front door as Seren scrambled toward the cellar entrance. She heard the crash of impact, heard snarls and screams and the sickening sound of steel meeting flesh. She did not look back. The root cellar was dark and cramped. But she had prepared for this. Her hands found the concealed latch by memory, and the hidden door swung open to reveal a narrow tunnel that emerged in the trees beyond the cottage. Seren crawled through on hands and knees, her pregnant belly scraping the earthen floor, her breath coming in terrified gasps. Behind her, the sounds of battle continued. Corvin was buying her time with his blood. She would not waste it. The tunnel spat her out into a thicket of brambles. Seren pulled herself upright, thorns tearing at her clothes and skin, and began to run. The king's howl had come from the east. She oriented herself by the stars just beginning to emerge and pushed deeper into the wilderness. The warmth in her chest pulsed with every step, growing stronger. She could feel Kalen drawing closer with every heartbeat. The arrow took her in the shoulder. Seren screamed as the impact spun her around, sending her crashing into a tree trunk. Pain exploded through her body, sharp and immediate, followed by a creeping numbness that she recognized with horror. The poison was already spreading. "Finally," a female voice called from the shadows. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you have caused?" A figure emerged from between the trees, tall and elegant, with hair like moonlight and eyes the color of a frozen lake. Lady Vila Solvan. 4 months of hunting, Vila continued, approaching with casual confidence. Dozens of my best trackers deployed across the kingdom. A fortune in bribes and a mountain of bodies, all because you could not simply accept your place. Seren gripped the arrow shaft with trembling fingers. The pain was secondary now to the numbness spreading from the wound. She had minutes at most before the poison reached her heart. My place, she managed through gritted teeth, as breeding stock. Vila's lip curled with disdain. That is all omegas are good for, certainly not as queens. She stopped a few feet away, drinking in Seren's suffering. He was supposed to be mine. I spent years positioning myself. And then, you appeared. A nobody with nothing to offer but a pretty face. He chose me, Seren said. He made a mistake, one I have spent 4 months correcting. Vela drew a long dagger from her belt. The poison will kill you slowly, the blade will be faster. Consider it a mercy. She raised the weapon, and the silver fire that Seren had kept buried for weeks erupted from her core like a star being born. The blast threw Vela backward, sent her tumbling across the frozen ground with a shriek of surprise and pain. Seren sagged against the tree, her entire body blazing with light that burned away the darkness and the poison and the fear. The babies kicked furiously, both of them at once from opposite sides, and she understood. Her children were not just carrying her gift, they were amplifying it, feeding power into her veins that she had never possessed alone. "What are you?" Vela snarled, scrambling to her feet. Her fine clothes were singed, her perfect hair disheveled. "Omegas cannot do that." "I am not just an Omega," Seren heard herself say. "I am the last daughter of the primal bloodline, the protectors, the ones your ancestors tried to eradicate because they could not be controlled." Her grandmother's stories, finally making terrible sense. Vila's face contorted with rage. "Then you are exactly what needs to be eliminated." She raised her hand, and from the forest, more figures emerged. Wolves, but wrong somehow. Their eyes were flat and empty. Their movements mechanical, devoid of natural grace. Controlled. Just as Kaelin had been controlled during the ceremony. "My father has been experimenting for years," Vila explained, circling Seren while her puppet wolves closed in. "The Moonsbane compound works on more than just kings. These were once common wolves from border villages. Now they are weapons." There were at least a dozen. They surrounded Seren in a tightening ring, their empty eyes fixed on her throat. The fire flickered. The surge of power that had driven back Vila was fading. The poison still worked through her veins. She was going to die here, in these frozen woods, with her babies still unborn and Kaelin so close she could feel his heartbeat. "If I am going to die," she said quietly, "I am taking as many of you with me as I can." The wolves lunged, and the forest exploded. A shape massive and black as midnight crashed through the attacking wolves like a battering ram of fury. Jaws snapped and claws tore, each movement precise and devastating. The puppet wolves were flung aside like toys, their controlled bodies no match for the raw, primal rage of a true alpha. Kaelin. Even in wolf form, even amid the chaos of battle, Seren recognized him instantly. The power that radiated from every movement, the absolute devastation he wrought upon anything that threatened what was his. Vela screamed orders at her remaining wolves, but they were falling too fast. The Alpha King moved through them like death incarnate. Within moments, it was over. Kaelin stood in the center of a ring of unconscious wolves, his black fur matted with blood that was not his own. His sides heaved, his eyes, blazing with feral light, swept the clearing until they found Seren. She saw the moment his gaze registered the arrow still protruding from her shoulder, the blood soaking her dress, the pallor of her skin. A sound tore from his throat, half howl, half sob, that made every surviving creature in the forest go silent. Then he was shifting, his wolf form dissolving into the man she had dreamed of every night for 4 months. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and caught her as her legs finally gave way. "No," he breathed, his hands hovering over the arrow as if afraid to touch it. "No, no, no." "Poison," Seren managed. "Moonsbane derivative, I can feel it spreading." "I can smell it." His voice cracked. "Seren, if I pull this out." "Then pull it out." I would rather die in your arms than standing against a tree. Something shattered in his expression. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms, broke before her. But his hands were steady as they gripped the shaft. This will hurt, he warned. Everything has hurt since I left you. This will just be more direct. He pulled. Seren screamed as the arrow tore free, but the sound was swallowed by the golden light that erupted from Kaelin's hands. Pure, radiant energy pressing into her wound with desperate intensity. If I claim you properly, he gasped, his body trembling with effort. Complete the bond. My wolf can heal what the poison has damaged. Let me save you, Seren. She understood what he was asking. The claiming bite, given and received. Souls intertwined permanently, a bond that could never be broken. You would be stuck with me forever, she whispered. I have been stuck with you since the moment we met. My heart has belonged to you since the first time you smiled at me. Forever is just making official what was always true. And in the space between heartbeats, Seren made her choice. Yes, she breathed. Kaelin's mouth found the curve of her neck, the place where her pulse fluttered weakly. His teeth sank into her flesh, and the world dissolved into light. Power flooded through her, his power, vast and ancient and absolutely devoted. It roared through her veins, burning away the poison, knitting torn flesh, filling the hollow places that months of separation had carved into her soul. But it was not complete. Not until she claimed him in return. With the last of her strength, Seren pulled his head down and pressed her lips to his throat. Her teeth broke skin. The bond detonated. It was not pain. It was completion. 2 halves of a single soul finally becoming whole. She felt Kaelin's essence pour into her as hers flowed into him. Every memory, every emotion. She saw the night of the ceremony through his eyes, the horror of waking 3 days later with no memory. She felt his desperation as he searched, his agony as weeks turned to months. And he saw himself through her eyes, not a king who had failed her, but a man who had been violated, who had never stopped being hers. When the light finally faded, they clung to each other in the blood-soaked snow, both trembling. I felt you, Seren gasped, every night, through the dreams. My wolf reached for you while I slept. I did not know if it was real. It was always real. He kissed her then, desperate and fierce, and filled with 4 months of longing. When they broke apart, a messenger burst into the clearing. My king! Lord Moren Solvain has declared himself regent. Half the noble houses have pledged to his claim. 3,000 wolves march on the capital. Seren's hand found Kaelin's. Together, she said quietly. Whatever comes. Together. The ride to the capital took 2 days. Seren rode before Kaelin on his warhorse, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, his body shielding her from the bitter wind. She had protested at first. She was perfectly capable of riding her own mount, but Kaelin had simply lifted her onto his saddle and silenced her objections with a look that brooked no argument. My wolf needs you close, he had murmured against her hair as they rode. 4 months of separation nearly destroyed us both. I will not let you out of my reach until every threat to you and our children is eliminated. Our children. Through the completed bond, she could feel his emotions as clearly as her own, the fierce protectiveness, the lingering terror of how close he had come to losing her, and beneath it all, a love so vast it took her breath away. As they traveled, Kaelin told her everything. He told her about waking from the drugged haze to find Vela Solvain in his chambers, attempting to seduce a king who had no memory of the past 3 days. About the horror that had flooded through him when his wolf finally broke free. About throwing Vila from his rooms and ordering her confined, only to have Lord Morin claim diplomatic immunity and spirit his daughter away. He told her about the search that had consumed every waking moment since. The sleepless nights. The way his control had frayed until his own advisors feared him. They thought I had gone feral, he admitted. Some days I thought so too. My wolf was tearing me apart from the inside, howling for you constantly. Seren's hand found his where it rested on her belly. I felt it too. The warmth that should not exist if you had truly rejected me. I told myself it was wishful thinking. It was me, reaching for you every moment of every day, refusing to let go. They crested the final hill as dawn broke, and Veldaris spread before them. Smoke rose from a dozen quarters of the city. The distant clash of steel rang through the morning air, and on the great banner above the castle gates, the silver serpent of House Sylvain now flew. They have taken the inner walls, Corvin said grimly, having survived his battle at the cottage with wounds that would heal. A scout rode forward, her face ashen. My king, Lord Morin, has taken hostages, servants, guards, nobles who refuse to bend the knee. He declares that if you do not surrender by noon, he will execute them all, starting with the children. Seren felt Kaelin's horror through the bond, sharp and visceral. How many hostages? 43, my lady, including the orphans from the palace nursery, the ones you used to visit before you disappeared. Seren's heart shattered. She remembered those children, had spent countless hours reading to them, bringing them treats from the kitchens. Little Pip had called her Lady Sunshine because she always made him smile. No, she said, her voice hardening with resolve. I will not allow this. Seren, those children are innocent. I will not let them die because of Morin Sylvain's ambition. She gripped his face, forcing him to meet her gaze. Morin expects you to surrender. He does not expect me. I can get inside, create a distraction, buy you time to find another way in. You will be killed. I will be underestimated. I am an Omega, remember? That is all Vela ever saw when she looked at me. I am betting her father sees even less. Through the bond, she felt his terror warring with recognition that she was right. I love you, Kaelin. The words came out before she could stop them, the first time she had said them aloud. I have loved you since the night you told me that designation meant nothing. I loved you even when I thought you had abandoned me. And I will love you until my last breath, whether that comes today or in 50 years. But I cannot let children die while I hide behind your army. His eyes glistened. I love you too, through everything, because of everything. He kissed her, fierce and desperate. Corvin, Kaelin said quietly. Find me another way into that throne room. We move the moment Seren gives the signal. Then she turned and walked toward the enemy stronghold. The great doors of the throne room loomed before her. I am Seren, she announced to the guards. The Omega your master has been hunting. I am here to negotiate for the hostages. The doors swung open. The throne room was a nightmare. 43 hostages knelt in rows before the raised dais, their hands bound, their faces streaked with tears. Children clung to the adults nearest them, their small bodies trembling. Guards stood behind them with blades drawn. And on the throne that belonged to Kaelin, Lord Morin Sylvain sat like a bloated spider at the center of his web. So, Morin said, his voice dripping with satisfaction, the Omega whore finally shows herself. I am here to make a trade, me for the hostages, all of them, released unharmed. Morin laughed. You think you have leverage here? You are one pregnant Omega against an army. You hold innocents who have done nothing to deserve your cruelty. Innocents? Morin rose from the throne, descending the steps with predatory slowness. There are no innocents in war, girl. He stopped before her. Your children, for example. Do you know what I intend to do with them once you are dead? Seren's hands curled into fists. I will raise them myself, the heirs of the royal bloodline, molded from birth to serve House Sylvain. They will never know their parents. They will believe whatever I tell them. Something inside Seren snapped. Silver fire exploded outward in a wave of blazing light. Morin stumbled backward with a scream, his fine robes catching flame. The puppet wolves lunged toward her, but the fire met them mid-leap, sending them crashing to the ground. You will never touch my children, Seren snarled. Your reign of cruelty ends now. But Moren had not survived decades of political warfare by being unprepared. Even as he burned, he pulled a small vial from his coat and hurled it at her feet. The glass shattered. Purple vapor erupted upward, engulfing Seren before she could react. Concentrated moonsbane, her fire guttered and died, her legs buckled beneath her. And as darkness closed in, she heard Moren's burned, furious voice commanding his guards. Kill her! Kill her now! The wall exploded inward. Kaelin burst through the rubble in wolf form, followed by Corvin and a dozen elite warriors. They had found another way in, through the ancient passages that Seren's distraction had given them time to navigate. But she could not appreciate the rescue. The poison was spreading too fast, shutting down her body system by system. She collapsed to the cold stone floor, one hand pressed to her belly where the twins had gone terrifyingly still. Through the fading bond, she felt Kaelin's scream of anguish. Then everything went dark. Seren drifted in darkness. She could feel nothing. The bond that had blazed so brightly was reduced to a distant ember, flickering at the edge of her consciousness. But she was not alone. Two small presences nestled against her awareness. Her children, still with her even in this void between life and death. They pulsed with light, feeding her warmth, refusing to let her slip away. Stay, they seemed to whisper. Stay with us. Stay with him. And beneath their gentle urging, she felt something else. Kaelin. His voice reached her through the darkness, raw and desperate. Seren, please, please, my heart. Do not leave me. I cannot do this without you. She wanted to answer, wanted to tell him she was fighting, but the poison held her trapped. The bond, another voice said. Corvin, use the bond, my king. Pour everything you have into her. I am trying. She is so far away. Then go deeper. Risk everything. If you hold back now, you will lose her forever. Warmth flooded through the bond like sunrise after endless night. Not just Kaelin's love, his very essence, his life force. Everything that made him who he was, pouring into her without reservation. The darkness began to recede. Seren gasped as sensation returned, the cold stone beneath her, the acrid smell of smoke, the sound of battle still raging. She forced her eyes open. Kaelin knelt beside her, his face gray with exhaustion. Behind him, Corvin and the royal wolves had formed a protective circle. You came back, Kaelin breathed, his hands cradling her face. You came back to me. You called me home? Her voice was barely a whisper. I heard you through the darkness. The twins kicked simultaneously. Kaelin laughed, a sound of pure, overwhelming relief, and pressed his forehead to her belly. My brave ones, he murmured. You kept your mother safe for me. A crash drew their attention. Morin Solvain stumbled through the protective circle. He was a ruin of the man who had threatened her minutes before. His clothes were charred, his face blistered. But in his remaining hand, he clutched a dagger that gleamed with poison. If I cannot have this kingdom, Morin snarled, then neither will you. He lunged toward Seren. He never reached her. Silver fire erupted from her palms, not the desperate burst from before, but a focused, controlled beam that caught Moren mid-stride. The flames did not merely burn, they purified, stripping away the corruption that had festered in his soul for decades. When the light faded, Lord Moren Solvain lay motionless on the throne room floor. Seren stared at her hands in wonder. The fire had not exhausted her this time. If anything, she felt stronger than before. The bond, Kaelin said quietly, when I poured myself into you, it amplified your gift. Our gift, she corrected. Yours and mine, and theirs. Around them, the battle was ending. With Moren fallen, the puppet wolves collapsed. The Solvain soldiers surrendered. And the hostages, the servants and guards and precious children, were finally, blessedly free. Little Pip broke away from the group and ran toward Seren, throwing his small arms around her legs. Lady Sunshine, he sobbed. You came back. The bad man said you were gone forever, but I knew you would come back. Seren sank to her knees, gathering the child against her chest. I will always come back, she promised. Always. In the days that followed, the kingdom of Veldaris began to heal. Lady Vila Sylvain was tried before the assembled packs and exiled to the barren ice fields of the far north, stripped of her name and her wolf. She would live out her days in the frozen wasteland, alone with the knowledge of everything she had destroyed. The puppet wolves, freed from the compound that had controlled them, were given the choice to return to their villages or remain in the capital. Most chose to stay, swearing loyalty to the king and queen who had liberated them. And on a golden morning, 3 weeks after the battle, Kalen stood before his people with Seren at his side. For too long, he announced, his voice carrying across the thousands who had gathered. Omegas in our kingdom have been treated as property, as breeding stock, as tools to be used by those with power. He turned to look at Seren, his eyes soft. My mate has shown me how wrong that belief is. She is the strongest person I have ever known. She faced an army with nothing but courage. She walked into enemy territory to save children she loved. He took her hand and raised it for all to see. From this day forward, Omegas in Veldaris will be protected, not possessed. They will choose their own paths. This is my decree as your king, and this is my promise to my queen. The crowd erupted in cheers. That night, in their private chambers, Kalen held her close and listened to their children move within her. 2 more months, Seren murmured against his chest. The healers say 2 more months. I cannot wait to meet them. His hand traced gentle patterns on her belly. Our son and daughter. Our miracles. They lay together in comfortable silence, the bond between them humming with contentment. I dreamed of this, Kalen admitted quietly. During those 4 months, I dreamed of holding you exactly like this, of feeling our children move, of building a future together. And now the dreams are real. He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. 2 months later, on the first day of spring, Queen Seren gave birth to twins, a boy with his father's dark hair and eyes that flickered between amber and silver, a girl with her mother's copper curls and a laugh that made flowers bloom in the royal gardens. Kalen held his children for the first time with impossibly gentle hands. Thank you, he whispered to Seren, who lay exhausted but radiant. For fighting for us. For believing, even when I gave you every reason not to. Seren reached up to touch the claiming mark on his throat, the scar that matched the one on her shoulder, both symbols of a bond that had survived everything. I never stopped believing, she said softly. We were always meant to find our way back to each other. Always, Kalen agreed. In this life and every life that follows. Outside their window, the wolves of Veldaris lifted their voices in a howl of celebration that echoed across the mountains and valleys of the realm. A new era had begun, and the Omega who had once been hunted, the woman who had defeated the Alpha King's elite guards and captured his heart, would reign beside him for all the years to come. Together. Always. Forever. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.